Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday morning. So my name's Jenny Garvey, and I'm an Executive Director at Jpmorgan Chase. I've worked in technology for about 20 years. So a lot of people think of Jpmorgan as a financial institution, and it really is. But it's really a technology company delivering financial solutions. So if you look at a few of the stats here, you can see just how significant technology is to being able to deliver our business. You know, 11 billion spent on technology, 50,000 technologists, so it's by no means a small organization. Here in the UK, we actually have 3 technology hubs, one in Glasgow, one in Bournemouth, which is the one I'm based at, and then one here in London. So I really like this quote from our CEO. And Jamie's basically saying, you know, a diverse team is really going to be the best team. And if we think about why that's important, it's really for things like, if we have diverse people in our team, they're really going to reflect our customers. And therefore, they're going to bring some thinking into our business that are going to resonate with our customers. And I think diverse teams bring us more innovation and different ways of problem solving, etc. And I also think the diverse teams build a more resilient team and therefore a more interesting place to work. So we retain. Next up, please. So on the gender front, this is actually our reality, right? This is why I'm here today. This is why I feel passionate about females coming into tech and from different backgrounds. I actually feel really passionate about our diversity overall, but the gender pipeline for us is tricky, right? We only get 19% into computer science degrees. So right from the very beginning, we're struggling with our diversity balance. Then that equates into 16% into the workplace. And then as we go up the seniority into our organizations, it's falling even further, and we're getting to about 10%. And things are changing, and we are making progress in this space. But when we're starting from a 19% baseline to choose from, we've got a challenge. Thanks, Will. So what are we trying to do to influence the pipeline? So there are some things that we are doing globally. So there's the Grace Hopper conferences that are really female-focused, huge conferences, US-based, India-based. We in Jpmorgan, our CIO is a female. Laurie Beer became our CIO in 2018, and that's a real milestone for us as Jpmorgan, that in our company of extremely talented technologists, our top technologist is a woman for the first time. Laurie Beer was one of the keynote speakers at these conferences. But we're also driving things at the more kind of grassroots level. So even just last week in Glasgow, we had about 120 school girls come into Jpmorgan and spend a day, a bit like what's happening here, where a challenge is given, a hackathon is given, and the coding is done. So there's lots of initiatives that we're trying to get in to girls at a younger age. If I'm honest, my own niece is probably fed up of me constantly trying to reset her mindset from wanting to be a nursery teacher to, why don't you think about engineering or technology like your brother and your aunt, etc. I think we're all driving for changing the kind of gender stereotypes right at the beginning. So next. So again, we need to also think about different ways to engage and inspire. So this also happens when we get technologists through our doors. So how are we building our communities? How are we inspiring people to come into technology? And some of those things would be through Spring into Technology, the kind of spring weeks we have in our organization, where again, young people come in and spend a week in our organization. We do external hackathons. And then within our organization, we have programs like Tech Connect, where we're taking non-computer science degrees, graduates, and putting them through a kind of immersive Java course to turn them into a software engineer and then to go on to our graduate scheme. Next up, please. So this is interesting for me as well, this quote. So within Jpmorgan, we've actually taken the inclusion piece out of the same kind of bucket as diversity and inclusion. And that's really to focus our attention on our existing resources, our people in our own organization, and really make the cultural changes to be a place that we all want to work and that everybody feels welcome, and obviously not just in the gender environment. Thanks. Building communities, telling our stories. So this is a great example. In the front there in the red jacket is Laurie Beer, our CIO. But this is all of our representatives at a global level for our diversity programs. But the community aspect is really important, whether it's as soon as you join our organization as a graduate or just a general new hire, or even at my level. So as an ED, I regularly have networking events, communities, support, mentorship from other female executive directors or managing directors within our organization. And that's really important for making me feel supported and valued and able to achieve anything. Thank you. So for me, this is kind of the main story, right? Of if we want to change the gender balance in technology, we need to start thinking about doing things differently. And the pipeline piece is playing the long game, right? This isn't something that we are going to change overnight, but it's events like this, and it's events where you guys all go out and you spread the message of, hey, technology is a great thing to be involved in, and it's great for women. And then the inclusion piece, cultural change, we all play that part. I think finding allies of the gender balance within our male colleagues is a really important piece as well. So with that, I'm going to stop. I think we're going to come together and have a Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that wonderful information and the statistics around what's happening at the moment with women trying to learn how to get into tech and then staying in tech, et cetera. This is a panel discussion, so what I'd like you to do actually is, you've already introduced yourself a bit. Angelique, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background? You've got a really interesting background from going from a creative side to a more technical side, and you're a software engineer, so tell us all about that.
That's right. I am a software engineer now at the Financial Times in Southwark, but I haven't always been a software engineer. So I'm from Sydney, Australia, as you might be able to hear at some points, but I actually started my career as a graphic designer. So I studied graphic design and new technologies in Australia, and I went on then to become an art director. And I was an art director for quite a few years at Australia's largest news organisation, which is Fairfax Media. And I worked with a number of magazines, and I loved that. I absolutely loved the creativity there and the freedom that I had. And from there, I transitioned into a slightly more technical role when they introduced a new publishing system called Methode, and it's used at a number of leading publications around the world. And so in that time, I helped to train the other art directors to use this new program and do their work in it every day. And so from there, so I sort of got into coding a little bit, but not too much. And then I actually went back to a more creative role, and I was a UX designer for a little while, and I designed their first iPad app, which I loved. So this was very new technology back in 2011. And
this is the iPad app for the Financial Times.
For the Financial Review in Sydney.
Review,
That's right.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, so
That's a big deal.
it was, and it was exciting because I'd never worked in UX before, and so we started by looking at other iPad apps that were around and looking at what worked best. And then from there, we launched the app, and I thought, okay, it's time for a bit of a change now, and I sort of looked around, and I considered moving to London. And at the time, a friend from the Financial Times got in touch and said, hey, we've got a great opening here for you. Are you interested? And I said, okay, it's in software engineering, which I had never done before. And I said, okay, all right, let's give it a go. But it was also moving their magazines into this new system called Methode. And so it was, again, creating some of that, combining some of that creative experience with something more technical. So I said, okay, I'll give it a go. And so I decided...
Can I just stop you there for one second? Because you were offered a job in software engineering and you'd never done software engineering?
Yes,
so
that's
how
right.
did you make that transition?
I really learnt from scratch, and I learnt on the job. So
did they
these
provide
days,
training for you?
Yeah, they did. I was very well supported within my team. But there was no external training in the way that there is now with wonderful institutions like Makers Academy or Founders and Coders. So that would have been a wonderful option back then, but it wasn't around. It's fairly new. And so we're talking about going back 7 years ago now. And so I joined the FT then, and it was a wonderful organization. So I'm very proud to say that our CIO at the time, Christina Scott, was obviously a woman, and she's now head of technology at News Corporation. And however, I was a little shocked at the time at with the lack of diversity there was in the technology department. Remember, I come from a very right brain field, and I was transitioning into something that was very technical, and I really had to switch how I thought. So I had to become very precise, very analytical, very clear with my communication. I couldn't afford to be, vague or airy-fairy about any details. Everything was very binary. So yes, this is happening. No, it's not. So I had to really train myself to think differently. But having said that, I started from the ground up and learned a hell of a lot and had a great team, and it's a fantastic company. So.
I think that's amazing. I did not know that about your story. So
yeah.
She said you'd come from a creative background and gone into software engineering. I had no idea you'd made that transition like that. But that, I think, talks a lot, Jenny, to the importance of supporting women into technical roles. What is Jpmorgan doing to do that?
So the Tech Connect program's a really good example where, so we have our graduate program where we're looking to hire predominantly software engineers, but not just. And the Tech Connect program really starts before that, where we are taking females predominantly, but again, not uniquely, who have an interest in transforming themselves, exactly like Angelique has done, of, hey, this could be for me, and giving them the training and the skills. So that's a really formal program. But one of the other things that Jpmorgan do is that we are really switching to hire on potential. So we quite often will have networking events, again, focused at women, to come in, talk about what Jpmorgan can actually do, what their skills are, what their interests are. And I know, for example, hired a young female a couple of years ago who didn't have the skills I needed for the job. But through that event, through looking at her CV, through talking about how she tackled some other things, I knew she had the interest and the aptitude that if we brought her in, and could support her through, and it's not just the formal classroom training, that doesn't work, right? It also needs to be the mentorship and the buddying system within the organization and the continual support. It's the learning on the job. It's starting with smaller pieces of work that build their confidence as much as everything else, because as Angelique probably will say, when you first move from a role that you were very comfortable in to something that is a real challenge but you're interested in, I think women quite often will have the little demon on their shoulder saying, was that a good decision? Did I make the right decision? And all it needs is somebody saying, here, this is it, great job.
Well, that's actually a great point. Angelique, when you were making that transition, I can imagine, I know what it's like to learn a foreign language or to live in a foreign country. And, you know, I remember I lived in France when I was 15 and I didn't speak any French. I arrived, I could say, je danse, tu danses, nous dansons, and that was like it. And I remember days going to bed, crying myself to sleep because I just was so overwhelmed with having to learn another language. I mean, obviously, now we know, you know, coding is another language and you have to learn it. So tell us about that. Tell us about that transition and how difficult that was for you, if it was difficult, and how you got through it. What things helped support you.
It is still difficult.
I love the honesty.
Yeah, I am still learning a lot. So at the moment, I'm transitioning from being a specialist in what I do, that is knowing a smaller subset of a language, to branching out and learning JavaScript, and it is very difficult. I mean, even just finding the time to do that alongside your day job. And, but also I found that the biggest hurdle for me was accepting that I didn't know stuff and that I'd have to be open to making mistakes and knowing that, being frustrated with my progress at some points and thinking, oh my God, how am I ever going to make this transition from here to here? But actually, once you accept that, I think, and being a bit open to a little bit of failure here and there, it will actually help your progression in the long run.
Did someone identify you as being a good candidate to go into that role? Were you encouraged by someone to do that? So someone picked up on what Jenny's saying, they saw traits in you that said this person would be a good software engineer.
Yes.
That's really interesting, too.
I was very fortunate because a former colleague actually told his colleagues at the FT about me and put me in touch with them. So that was very fortunate. But having said that, my first real job in the world after graduating was an art director. I was 21 and I'd just returned to Australia after a year in France, actually. And I was looking for work and I was applying for a few different things, and then this job as an art director came along at the Australian Financial Review. And I went for the interview and thought, oh God, I don't think that went very well, really. I was quite, downhearted. And then, lo and behold, I got a call and I was accepted for it. It was such a senior role for me at that time. I couldn't believe it, but I think it does take that faith from somebody to see something in you and to actually think, I think you'd be great, and to put you, take you up on it. That's a huge blessing, really.
But for me, part of that is your openness to actually hear that. So I think one of the things that I think we're working on in pipeline is the reticence that women quite often have about their own abilities and their ability to really succeed at something that they're a little bit more nervous about. So, I mean, we all know the kind of stories of a guy will go for a job that he's 40% in an interview that he's 40% confident in, and women need to be 120%. I actually think there's some truth to that. I see it every day where we all are a little bit hesitant, and it just needs someone to say it and you to hear it.
No, I think that's not true. But what's interesting is the operative word you used was he. He put you forward.
Yes.
So, Jenny, I want to touch on that because I'm sure you guys have heard of or read maybe Dame Helena Morrissey's book, It's a Good Time to Be a Girl. And in that book, because she was talking about getting 30% of women on boards, right? Yep. So very similar to the situation we've got right now. Women going into tech, it's below 20%. Boards similar to that when she started was below 10%. And actually, I was thinking those statistics. I mean, actually, I used to work for Founders for Schools, and it was all about encouraging students to become entrepreneurs and introducing them to tech. And the numbers when I was working with them, which was probably in 2013 or something, was below 10%, I'm sure, for girls going into tech stuff, studying-wise. So I feel like I saw those numbers and thought, wow, we've come up. Progress. Yeah, we've made serious progress. But it's the same thing on this moving on the boards. She's trying to get 30% on boards across the UK and the top companies. But what she really argues in the book is that men, if you have a bunch of women in a room talking about this stuff, everyone agrees. Everyone says, yes, this is great, we should do it. It wasn't until one of the top chairmen at one of the top companies in the UK said, right, I'm going to sign a piece of paper that says I'm going to make this happen for my board, that all the other guys got on board. So how do you work in Jpmorgan to get men on board with this gender equality issue?
So we're actually pretty good in that. Actually, for all of our diversity, we have allies. right? So we have women in technology allies, and they're global leads and they're local leads, and these are men who are actually standing up and saying, I'm with you. And one of the things that recently has been happening around Jpmorgan is there has been an event called Sit With Me. So if you think back to the slide on the communities, and I said that's Laurie Beer in the red jacket, well, actually one of the things, I think part of the reference of the red jacket was to the red seat that has basically taken a tour around all of our locations, and it's come sit with me and support gender diversity. And we see men standing up and talking about why it's important for them in the workplace, why it's important for their team. One of the things that I didn't mention on the slides, but there is actually some research that's come out of the European Commission that has really proven that there is a financial benefit to having diverse teams. I think it was something like 35% more back to your shareholders if you have diverse teams bringing diversity of thought. So if I think back to Jamie's quote about, you know, the best team is a diverse team, it's because it's better for all of us because we do better business. And I think men are seeing that, and there is lots of opportunity for them to show that and support that. I've been really lucky in all of my career. I've always been a minority, but I have never been isolated. And actually, I think sometimes it's worked to my advantage being the minority, because what with my Scottish accent and being female, nobody forgets who I am. You know, I turn up to meetings and I'm instantly known. Whereas that doesn't always happen when you've got a sea of men. So I think I've also been really lucky that I've always worked with managers who are gender balance allies, that are always striving to bring more women into their organisation for the value that they bring. And I think some of the value that they bring is the collaboration piece.
That's great. Thank you for that wonderful response. And I think it's so important to acknowledge the role that both genders have to play in getting to gender equality. One of the things I want to talk about a little bit, and I don't think I introduced myself, I'm Joy Foster and I run Tech Pixies, and we're all about getting women back into work who've taken career breaks. So gender equality is an issue certainly in the early stages, but as you pointed out rightly, as you go higher up, it becomes even narrower, and the roles are, you said 10%, I think.
Yep.
And this, I can tell you from my experience, has a lot to do with women stopping to have families. And one of the things that is starting to happen are the returner programs to get women back into work. And I'm not an anti-career break advocate. We've done some research. We found 45% of women felt a career break damaged their long-term career. But I wouldn't say don't take a career break. I'd say take a smart career break, right? But what I'd love to know from both of you is, what is the FT and what's Jpmorgan doing about career breaks and helping women come back so that they get back on track with their career after they've had that career break, if they so choose?
So at the FT, we started to see a trend in that women, new mothers, were returning to work after having children, and then soon after leaving the company. And so we needed to do a lot of investigation there about why that was happening and how to make the conditions better for women, so in order to retain them better. And so we have started something which is very simple. It's really actually mentoring, so pairing a new mother or father, in fact, who've returned from parental leave, and pairing them with someone else who's been through that and can help guide them through some of the stresses that brings, or some of the uncertainties, I suppose. So, and we're also very encouraging of shared parental leave. So at the FT, I run a network called FT Women UK, and we help to support women and anyone really at the Financial Times. And so this is something that we are very focused on, and trying to ease people back into work after shared parental leave.
That's great. And what about you, Jenny?
So similar, We have Working Families Network, again, not just women, but really providing that support. We are looking at when women go off on maternity, what works for them as they come back. So there's a lot more flexibility being considered. So whether it's 4 days a week or compressed hours or even just the flexibility, and this isn't specifically for women just returning from maternity. It's actually for all of our staff, right? Because we've got people looking after elderly parents, we could have people with grown-up children that suddenly have problems, whatever. The flexibility to be able to break your working day, even if you just want to go to the gym at 11 o'clock during the day, well, start early, finish later, take your break in the middle. So there's those kind of things. We've also, right now, we've got, so every year we run this, it just happens that it's running for now. There's a 12-week program of returners, and that is for women who have been on a career break, and they come back into the organisation on a fairly structured with education to begin with, 12-week program into a team, fully supported. So for example, I am mentoring someone who is on that program and supporting them in the reintroduction. And at the end of it, there's probably the opportunity for a full-time role if that's what they want. But it's bringing them back into the organisation. And again, it's with the expectation that it doesn't always have to be full-time. So I think we're getting a little bit smarter about that. But I think even just to the mentoring piece, I think that mentoring happens throughout the organisation to retain women as well. So yesterday, I had a conversation with someone who is looking to take their next step, right? They're thinking about promotion. And while we were talking around what's kind of holding her back, her manager supports it and her manager's manager supports it. So why is she not pushing herself forward? One of the things that we discussed was that she's got 2 young children, she's a little bit worried about the impact. And the conversation we basically had was, but your job's not changing. Expectations might raise if you get this promotion, but it's not an overnight, suddenly you're going from working 8-hour days to working 14-hour days. That's not what promotion's about. And it's just resetting those expectations and those fears that people have that might hold them back.
Oh, those are great. It doesn't surprise me at all that both of you are working in companies that have initiatives, and I think that's so important to set the standard that we need those initiatives. I think before we open up to everybody else, I want to ask one more question. And I'm a big fan of storytelling. I love to hear people's stories, and I think they really resonate with people. Can you describe an instance in your company where maybe there was an all-male team and then the gender balance was adjusted and it changed the outcome, or a situation where maybe you came in and were the gender balance, but just can you pinpoint a place in time or a moment in time in your careers where you really saw the evidence of that gender balance making a difference?
Do you want to go? I'll go. Okay. So for me, it was a female senior leader coming into a role with a male leadership team under her. And before she came into the role, there was a bit more of a hero culture, right? I'm going just for myself. Look, I'm doing a great job. As she came in, what I saw change was a lot more of that. We've got team objectives. We're all in this to be successful. And the dampening down on what I would see as a bit more selfish behaviour. And so you saw a lot more, if you've got a problem, what can I do to help you with that problem, because your problem's my problem.
Wow. That's a powerful story.
For me, it would be when I first started at the FT, bearing in mind this is 7 years ago and things have changed a lot since that time, but it was being slightly late for an all-department meeting and walking into our conference suite, and this is for the technology department back then, and I saw I saw a sea of balding, bespectacled faces all turn around to look at me. And I just caught myself and thought, oh my God, what am I doing here? I can't relate to you, and you probably can't relate to me. And it was just, at that time, there were very few women in the department, which I'm pleased to say is not the case anymore. But that was one of the things that led me to then start the Network for Women at the FT.
So that moment was one of those game changer moments. I totally did that. I went to a board meeting for an app that we were doing the marketing for, the social media marketing, and I brought a couple gals with me who were doing the account work. They were the ones actually doing the execution. I was the account manager. Anyway, we came into this meeting, and it literally was like that. You walk in, and there were 8 men. They all had gray suits on, gray ties, and I was just like, okay, we'll just do this thing. And we literally changed the balance from 8 men to then all of a sudden there were 11 total, and 3 of us were women.
Yes.
Anyway, the only other women in the room were the ones bringing in the coffee, and then they left. And when we got in the car to go back, one of the gals who was a nurse before she did our program, she said to me, the last time I was in a situation like that, I was the person bringing in the coffee. And I said, that's why I wanted you in this meeting, because I wanted you to see that you don't always have to do the coffee. And there's nothing wrong with being the person that delivers the coffee. It's just, if you have the opportunity to be sitting at the table, why not take it? And I was so thankful that we could be in that situation. So I think, is this now a good time to open up to the audience? Thank you so much for your honesty and your openness. Those are some great stories, and I hope we have some great questions from the audience.
Cool. 3 questions, that's great.
Yeah, that's always good.
It is.
Hi.
We can hear you.
We're good.
Thank you so much for this interesting talk. I'm myself actually working in a startup, and I was very much interested in your mentorship. So we're very lucky because I've got 38% women in my tech teams, so we're doing very well. However, those women don't have any role model. We're 55 employees at the moment, and you're talking about mentorship, but within a 55 people companies, we can't actually put that program. And I would like them to get mentors. I really do, because actually those role models that you're speaking of. However, I don't know how to go about it, because I'm the head of people. I don't have all of those tech relations that you may have. And I was wondering, for all the startups that may be here, how would you go about actually putting a mentoring program, but externally focused, to get actually proper mentors for those ladies?
Did you guys get that? How do you set up a mentoring program in your company if she's got a smaller company and bringing it in externally? Is that correct? Yeah, so how would you set up an external mentoring program?
So I think there's things like Meetup, right? So if you guys look at Meetup, you'll find groups for Agile or groups for AI, machine learning, etc. So I think you could do something like that of a number of organizations coming together. I think these kind of events for meeting and networking. So part of my joy of being here is hearing Angelique and Joy talk about their experiences as much as me sitting on this stage, because then I feel comfortable that we're all out there trying to make the change. And I think you just have to do it. Like, you can probably talk about this more because you set it up.
You are the network queen.
Yeah, you set it up in your own organization.
Yeah. I think in a small organization, just speaking internally for your startup, if you can find somebody that you admire who you think would make a great impact for you and help you a lot, just approaching them and asking if they'd like to be a mentor is a great first step, I think. In terms of, I mean, most people are very, very honored to be a mentor, and they will happily give up your time, and you'll obviously spend a lot of your time helping people. And it's a way for somebody senior to give back and to help guide and shape someone else's career, I think. So do you have someone senior at your organization that you can call upon?
Hello. Yeah, the ladies I was speaking about are actually the head of data science. So I would like her to get a mentor outside.
Oh, I see.
So that's the problem. We do have actually, it's not the juniors that we have that are actually women, it's lead of tech.
Yeah, do you know,
So those people don't have anyone. We have a great VP of engineering that actually support 100% diversity, but he can't be the mentor, he's the direct line manager. So that's my problem is, and you know women, I mean, some of them go out and actually network a lot, and some others not. So I would like them to get a mentor externally, a leader where they can learn and actually go to the next steps.
There are, so I just heard, do you know who Vanessa Vallee is? So she wrote Heels of Steel, and she built We Are the City. So I just heard her speak a couple weeks ago at an event like this, and she said there's 2,000 women's networks in London, 48 of them are tech. So there are 48 women's networks that are around tech, and she runs one of them. We Are the City Tech, I think, is one of them. And there's some serious names in there, so I would definitely recommend. We Are the City, and then I think We Are the City Tech. And they've got events all the time. She's is fantastic. An amazing woman. My goodness. Yeah. So, yeah, I think We Are the City Tech is their Women in Tech program. And it's a networking, We Are the City is networking for women, I think, primarily. Yep, hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you for your discussion. It's been really enlightening. I have sort of two questions.
I can't hear you. You guys, we can't hear you.
Sorry.
Good.
I have two questions. The first one is around you were talking about women or parents maybe returning back from a career break. I was wondering, you mentioned a lot about sort of helping them adjust back into work. Have you seen the need to sort of help people who are in their teams, their colleagues? Because sometimes, does it ever happen where maybe it's the manager now is kind of worried that if I give them this responsibility, will it be too much for them? Or, have you had to deal with maybe not them, the people returning, but people around them who are working with them? Do they need to do some adjusting to them as well? Or is there, so that was the first question. I don't know if I should let you...
Well, can we do that question first, because I'm a little forget. What this report we just did said something like 42% of women feel sidelined and undervalued at work when they go back, and I think that addresses this issue that when they're coming back, their bosses aren't wanting to give them. They don't give them the best clients, or they don't give them the best projects, or they don't, or if they're working part-time, they don't feel like they can give them the work that they need. How do you address that with the team around the people coming back and making sure that they've got the mindset shift to make sure that person gets the support they need?
I think it is really important to have a team who is supportive of each other, really, and that comes from being, so I have a colleague who has a dog, and she adores her dog, and sometimes she has to go to vet appointments or leave early to go to puppy class and that kind of thing, and that's perfectly wonderful for her to do. Similarly, she's very understanding when someone else has a dentist appointment or something, and we have something called leaving loudly. So it means that when you need to leave to go to do something that is essential, don't just sort of creep out, silently. Say, okay, I've got this now, and something I have to do, and it's important to me, and so this is my break for the day, and I'm going to do this. So it's having that culture of understanding, I think, within teams and organizations, and having that also come from top down too is really important. So making sure that that your senior management and leaders are okay with this as well, and maybe even having senior management who work part-time. So our head of HR, Sarah Hopkins, she works 4 days a week, and that's part of our new flexible working policy as well. So.
Got to thank the millennials for flexible working, I think. They really changed the game for everybody.
It's an expectation.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think for me it goes back to, within Jpmorgan, we've really split the inclusion piece out from diversity and inclusion for that reason, right? So that is, when you're in our workforce, regardless of whether you're a returning mother or you're somebody with autism or whatever, right? Somebody with a dog, it's that you are included and that you do have that flexibility. I think part of the not being isolated or getting to the point that you feel as though you're not being given that work is just open dialogue. So it's the teams having regular communication. When somebody comes back, the check-ins, how is it going? The buddy, the mentor, everybody is kind of looking out for each other. I think that's the key piece. And also raising your voice and being heard. If you don't like something, say you don't like it.
Have the confidence to speak up. Do you have a second question? Okay, all right, okay. Did that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay. One more. Okay, last question. Lucky lady
Make it a good one. No pressure.
Hello, excellent. So I guess there's been loads of big companies who have put like diversity and inclusion into some of their like core priorities. At least for me, so the company I work at, sometimes I find it hard, particularly on a software engineering and technical team that's mostly like, predominantly men to have. Like I find it hard to see when the senior leadership is saying, oh yes, we need to focus on diversity and inclusion. I'm not seeing it necessarily filtering down all the way onto the really like on the ground where me or like all like the other women on the team and really the other men as well. I'm not really seeing them sort of championing diversity and inclusion, and so I'm wondering, especially from like in your position, sort of how do you think that we should be able to get, I guess, like middle management focused on starting to deliver these diversity and inclusion initiatives down on the level where it kind of matters to us?
So from my perspective, there is a lot of training that is focused on our middle level management around that diversity and inclusion. So on the diversity front, there's lots of training about interviewing, unconscious bias, etc. And then on the inclusion front, it is those kinds of pieces around regular check-ins, actually understanding what flexible means. Flexible working means it doesn't just mean somebody wants to work part-time. It could be that they want to disappear for 3 hours in the middle of the day because that's what's important to them. But I also think, from my perspective, this cultural change has to happen everywhere. So for those junior levels, females, they should be saying, who's going to be my ally? Who do I see in this organization that's going to come sit with me and support what I'm doing? What senior women do I admire? Who am I going to go out and be brazen enough to say, will you mentor me? If you don't ask, you don't get. And I really would be just pushing those boundaries as much as possible. And I think you guys are in a really strong position now because I think your male colleagues are coming on this journey with you. They just need to be reminded sometimes that, you know, you're there, your voice is ready to be heard and you have something to bring to the table that they don't.
I think that's a great point, Jenny, actually. So what I've heard around our department is that there are some very vocal people who are champions, and they're not particularly senior, they might be more sort of middle management, but they hear something that's going on that's not quite right, they will address it straight away, and it really takes those people who are very important in changing the culture of a place and of teams. So I think they're very important to have around. And even potentially being that person yourself, once you get to that stage of feeling confident enough to do that.
I think speaking up is really important. I think those points were really good. I would just add there's also ways to speak up which are productive and positive and move things forwards. And then there's ways to say things that don't actually make the conversation go better. And I had one of my mentors and also the gal who helped us raise investment for my company the other day. I said to her something about, we'd met with Liz Truss, the Treasury gal, and we were talking. I was saying I got really frustrated because I talked about pensions for women who've taken career breaks, and she rolled her eyes. And my mentor said to me, how did you say it? You know, how did you ask that question? And I said, well, I think what I said was something like, there's a huge problem with pensions for women taking career breaks. And she said, well, that was your problem right there. You never speak to politicians that way. You have to praise them for the work they've done. You have no idea if she's just tried to get something passed that was along those lines and it just failed and you've just tapped into that. So I thought that was amazing advice, and coming from a politician's daughter, I guess that was great advice. But I would definitely say speaking up is the most important thing that women can do. It's one of the reasons why all this progression is happening, the Me Too movement and everything else, where women are saying, no, we're not going to do it that way anymore, we're going to do it this way. But there is a way to speak up that is going to move things forward versus a way that's going to move things backwards. So definitely think about how you're going to approach people, who you're going to speak to, and like Jenny said, get allies, and you know, do it the right way and
be authentic, right?
Yeah, always be authentic.
You. Don't
always.
Try to be another male in your organization that you see, right? We're all individuals. Just be true to yourself, I think, and that's speaking up.
Yeah, because if you try and be someone you're not, it comes across immediately. So hopefully that was helpful. Thank you, ladies.
Brilliant. Thanks. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. That was great.
Yeah, it was really good.